Welcome to Cybersecurity Today, our week in review panel. I'm your host, Jim Love. This week, we have our regular panel. We have Terry Cutler, head of Cyology Labs in Montreal. Welcome, Terry.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm just fabulous. I'm lying, of course. We're recording this in the morning, and I'm not, of all things, I'm not a morning person. It's 8 a.m., but we can, except for David Shipley, who lives in the future. So he's got to sleep in for an hour. Speaking of David Shipley, how you doing? Head of Beauceron Securities?
I am well, and I am enjoying the very last business trip of the year, live from New York City. It's not Saturday night, but I can't wait to be home. So today is my last visit, giving the Psychology of Cyber Risk talk, and then back home for business planning and kicking off 2025.
So how's the growth coming? You topped your 1 million mark?
We passed the 1,015,000 people fished. I haven't got my McDonald's sign yet. More than 1,100 customers, and I've done really well. Of course, all of the chaos that we're now seeing about this whole tariff thing is an interesting situation to be in as the only Canadian security awareness company at scale serving across the country. And so that's going to be fun because the Canadian dollar is diving down. Hey, my stuff's going to be even more affordable in US dollars. To Canadian companies looking at their bills, give me a call. We can get you a better solution.
Yeah. And you're traveling, so you don't have to carry American Express checks. I don't remember those. Remember to carry the American Express check because if they're lost or stolen, they can be replaced. Now it's I carry the Canadian dollar. If it's lost or stolen, who cares? John Pinard joins us this morning from beautiful downtown. Where are you? Here,
Pickering.
Pickering. Yes, I'm Pickering. I've never pickered, but I'm sure you're there. And welcome. And John is he's been on the panel before. You've been here before. He's
Yes.
Financial services exec and cybersecurity executive. So he's just perfectly qualified to be here. He had a microphone that gets you on the show. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. We're going to get started. Everybody knows the format. This is, by the way, our penultimate show. I like to use the word penultimate. That's second last, I think, but we're going to do a Christmas year in review show somewhere before we take our holiday, which is generally about the 20th of December. We go into reruns till the 4th, but somewhere between there, we'll do a year-end show. This is our penultimate show, and everybody by now should know the format. It's we all brought stories that we're going to talk about, and the stories are interesting because they brought something from the past month that we can learn from, or we can use, or we can have a good discussion about. And that's our start. I'm going to start out with the first story because I saw, David, you actually put this one on LinkedIn as well. This got me going. There's a new hack that's gone out. Bleeping Computer did the story first. We did a story on it as well. And it's a novel phishing campaign that uses corrupted Word documents to evade security. The reason I picked this up, I gave it A+ for creativity. And that was what a crazy thing to think about. So the essence of it is I send you a broken file, incomplete in some aspect. And Windows dutifully restores that file. So it gets past any of your endpoint checking, and it has no malware in it. It has a barcode or something that I'm going to click on, or something that's going to draw me to another site. And that's going to say, hey, you need to restore this document and get all your data back. So just please give me your username and password. That's a pretty fair assumption of it. David, you, as our phishing expert, the Filet of fish himself. Are you seeing this? You put it on LinkedIn. Have you seen this campaign yet?
I haven't personally seen one of these attachments, but I am absolutely 1,000% not shocked by this. This speaks to the continued battle of cleverness between defenders and attackers. And it's why there will never be a technological silver bullet to malware and phishing. Email filters are not stopping 99.9%. And I got into this debate earlier this month with a very prominent CISO and on LinkedIn. And there was this whole thing where they said the email filters catch and only let through 0.001%. And I'm like, no, man, it's a lot higher than that. We've seen it as high as 10% in the last 6 months in our actual hard data. I'm not surprised by all of this. And the challenges here are huge because does this mean that all the email filter vendors are going to have to license Microsoft Word so that they can sandbox, detonate things when they are malformed file, and then go from there? Like, it's just going to keep evolving. And it's not just Word documents. WinRAR files will also do this kind of self-healing. And what the article pointed out is that there's elements inside the headers of these files that allow you to reconstitute and rebuild them. When you reconstitute and rebuild them, away we go. You say corruption, I say hilarious new form of encryption.
I'm going to use that one next time I've got a really great encryption formula.
Super hilarious, but this is just the world we live in, and expect more with AI. And we'll talk about AI is really good at finding ways of just changing small bits. And that's one of the things is that I read a really interesting research paper that talked about this concept of data drift and email filters, and small changes can have dramatic impacts on how the AI scores something. So this is just people being clever. The meme that came to mind when we were preparing for the show is that classic Jurassic Park, clever girl velociraptor that pops up, because props, this was clever.
I thought we were losing you as culture critic there, David. You've come back. Okay, Jurassic Park, here we go. Yep. Terry, you talk to me about this.
This is also known as Fileless malware. So we've also I've started seeing this back in 2018, where someone even tried to send me a file over LinkedIn saying, hey, there's this new role that just opened up. You'd be the perfect candidate for this. So then we put it in the simulator, and next the file opens up correctly. Everything's good. But of course, you got the banner, you want to enable macros. And of course, the moment you open that, it goes to the web, pulls down the malware, and then tries to execute. And of course, EDR just freaking lit up and said, what the hell are you doing here? Why is it opening up? Why is Word trying to open up a command prompt and try to run PowerShell scripts? That's not normal. Cut it off.
John, are you thrilled to see this new creativity coming into your shop? To a financial institution near you? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a big deal, right? No, I'm kidding. That's right.
It's not a big deal, but John, you're the head of cybersecurity.
It reiterates the fact that no matter what you put in, David talked about it a minute ago, that there is no silver bullet. At the end of the day, it will always come down to human error. And when a human error, it's the human is the one that clicks on it. And so it really pushes the emphasis on needing to make sure that we educate our staff on what to look for. If you're not sure, ask. What we do is we've got that report phishing button in our Outlook that if you're not sure, click report phishing. All right, it goes to my cybersecurity team. They will investigate it. They'll let you know if it's a problem or not.
If you have a small office, you can have a conversation and have that same policy that says, hey, come on over and look at this. So just because you got a 2 to 3 person shop doesn't mean you still can't do that. It works very effectively, even with 20 employees or more.
Yes.
Yep. So you're going to get into this psychological mumbo jumbo with David Shipley. Eh? I'm looking for I want the silver bullet, the technical silver bullet, guys.
And listen, I'll say this, as long as technology is made by humans, it will be as beautifully flawed as we are.
Exactly.
The day that technology makes technology, what with Ray Kurzweil's singularity, cybersecurity is no longer humanity's biggest problem with technology. We will have a whole new problem.
Read my new book.
Have you ever seen the shirt, David, where they used to give these out at conferences? There's no fix for human stupidity. Have you seen that one?
Okay.
Shipley tries to be nice about it, though.
Okay. There's actually something I'm working on, a 3,000 word paper for the Canadian Cybersecurity Network. Go after this one point, Terry. And I used to say the same things, but here's the truth of it. If an organization was truly full of stupid people, cybersecurity, not the number one threat to the future of that organization. And they're not, right? Most organizations, notwithstanding the creation of things like Doge in the US, are full of really good, smart, passionate people who want to do their jobs well. Our challenge is motivating them to apply knowledge that we disseminate through security awareness and other things at the time when it matters the most. And so we don't have the stupid user fallacy. We have, why should I care about this motivational challenge? One of the scary things, and Jim and I talked about this fall in the research that we've done, is that people that think the tech tools completely protect them, so their email, their antivirus, or email filters, they're 50% more likely to click. And so that's the number that you need to get down. You need to tell people, email filters aren't perfect. Trust your gut.
And I think
Yeah.
tied in with that, the big fallacy to me in corporations is that cybersecurity is a corporate thing. Everybody that walks through the door and claims to be an employee needs to be responsible for cybersecurity. IT will look after the back end of it, but every time you get an email, you need to look at it and go, could this potentially be malicious? Or when I get a file, could there be something in it? Is there this click here to enable macros? Should I be worried about that? I think it's everybody's responsibility, not just IT.
So we're going to go on to my second story, which is another one that's based on the human factor. I read this story and it was just one of those things. I did a story on it for Cybersecurity Today because it just amazed me. We're always talking about the technical parts of this, but offboarding, when someone leaves and you think big companies must have that handled, right? Not exactly. Apparently, Disney had an employee that left and they didn't remove him from the system for whatever reason, left him with his access to the systems. And he went in and did a DDoS attack on his fellow employees and hacked their menu system. And this is really like, on one hand, it's weird, but on the other hand, you wonder what damage a former employee could do. Hacked their menu system so that he removed the peanut allergy warnings from foods in their restaurants, or at least was attempting to. And that could kill people. I was flabbergasted to say, hey, I could understand if this is with tiny business, but a big business like Disney, nobody checks to see that a person we've fired, left under bad circumstances, is taken off all the systems. I couldn't believe that could happen.
I'm going to jump in for a second on that one because we're actually going through that, is making sure that we have a thorough checklist for onboarding and offboarding. Because I was talking to an individual at another financial institution, and they were telling me that they found recently an employee that had left the company 12 years ago still had access. Thank God it wasn't anything super critical, but they still had access and were still actively using their login credentials to get into a credit bureau system that they had from when they were an employee 12 years ago. But like I said, the credit bureau thing, it could have been a lot worse. So this is one of the things that we discussed as part of an audit and have gone through dramatic changes to our offboarding procedure to make sure that it's easy for us from an IT perspective that we can disable everybody's account that IT manages. But there's this little thing called shadow IT. You may have heard of it. And so that's still a big problem. And what we've had to do is we've had to educate the managers within the organization to say, hey, when somebody leaves, we'll let you know that we have completed our portion of it, but you need to make sure that you're removing access to any system that they had that was managed by your team.
And this is,
Yeah.
we were implementing this back when I used to work for Novell back in the day. We had Identity and Access Manager. This is where identity and role-based administration works really well in situations like this. Because back in the day, we had this thing called 0-day start, 0-day stop. The moment you get hired, it creates you an account in Active Directory, in Novell Z directory, finds an available extension in the phone system. Everything gets associated to you in one shot, in theory, right? But then eventually, once you leave the company, everything gets shut down once you deactivate the account. So we need to start looking at more technology like this that can help automate these processes, because things get forgotten, or they'll say, my last day is next Thursday, and then you guys forget about it, or maybe there was an extension, or maybe the guy was using somebody else's account. All these things need to be looked at.
And one of the things tied in with that too is that it's not just making sure that you disable or delete the person's account, but I'll pick Microsoft as an example. Somebody's got a OneDrive account. They've got all these files that are there. You need to make sure that they go to somebody. So there needs to be, as part of that offboarding, where do you pass on the files, old emails, and those types of things to, so that they're still accessible for somebody within the organization that still needs them.
Getting the documents in is one thing, but you pointed out if you've got shadow IT or SaaS programs that are out there, you have to check your company credit cards too. I found this 6 months after somebody's gone, we're still paying for their LinkedIn account. So you've also got this expense item that's happening out there. And in many cases, it just flies under the radar. Don't get me started on automatic billings like that. I believe there should be a law that says once a year, you should have to renew and get a positive approval for any billing. But I'm a communist. So what can I say?
In situations like this, we've seen cases when I used to work for private investigation firms, if employees still had access to the employer's system without their knowledge, especially making changes to the systems, which could be criminal, we used to execute what are called Anton pillar orders. We used to show up at the guy's house unannounced. We knew about it like a day or two before. We knew that guy was going to have a bad day on next Wednesday. Show up, take all his equipment and analyze it and then take him to court kind of thing.
Would you like to have Cutler arrive at your doorstep with two other big guys behind him saying, we're here
Like a
for your
selfie.
equipment? I knew that look wasn't exactly only from cybersecurity.
I always pay your bills on time.
That Simpsons clip of goons, hired IT goons. We're here. I think the shadow IT thing is huge because the beauty of tying everything into single sign-on and in as many systems as you can is that one ring to rule them all, and then you still have those other problems. The other part about this is why audits are so valuable. And it's why we should be possibly a little less adversarial about the audit process. And it's the external auditor, probably really shouldn't be the external auditor finding these things, but your internal audit team saying, okay, last 6 months, we've offboarded 10 employees. Let's look at 3 cases and just double check all the work was done according to the checklist. And if they find a gap in the process or an error that's consistent, possibly consistent across all 3, oh, we missed this, then you improve your process. And one of the things that I worry about in this field is that we forget that continuous improvement is a good thing. Yes, we've got 1,001 problems and we tend to be reactive, but we're better, always improving on that side. And I think for executives who might be listening to this, or dear IT manager who needs to get this message to their executive, it's okay to find flaws in your internal audit and fix them and improve, and you should find them and you should celebrate that.
That's exactly, David, how we found the flaws or the limitations, I'll call them, in our onboarding and offboarding process. And 100% with you, I have no issues. I get strange looks at work sometimes because I consider our internal audit team my friend. I look forward to them coming in because they're either going to tell me I'm doing a good job or they're going to show me areas where we need to improve. Yep. And I'd much rather the audit team find that than cyber hackers.
We had a situation, we do a lot of work in healthcare. We just did one a couple of months ago, doing audit on an Active Directory. There's 38,000 active accounts in the system. This is like an 18,000 employee shop. 38,000 active systems, but 21,000 of it haven't logged in over a month. Whoops.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go over this audit thing. And we've been through this, and Reverend Shipley will give you a sermon on this. So in partial place, if your internal audit group thinks their job is to catch you and make you squirm, they are doing the corporation a disservice. Their job is to help you make sure that things don't happen, not that they can find them later and blame you.
And I'll give another analogy. And I'll share that I have a higher risk for colon cancer. So I have a 5-year screening program, and I don't say I'm excited by the colonoscopy, but I'm not running away in fear from that because the doctor's not there to cause me harm. He's there to go and find and see if there's something that needs to be dealt with that we can improve and that we can preventatively catch early. And it's worth doing that. Now, your internal audit is not like a colonoscopy every single time.
Why do you think it's called a penetration test?
We need to have that collaborative care mentality about technology. And I think that's the important part. Wrapping up men's health. You're in that age group, guys, go get checked.
We're going to go to your story next, John. No, we're going from that story. John, you had a couple stories you want to bring to us.
Both of my stories are a little closer to home. The stories themselves are interesting and informative. The first story is talking about the Blue Yonder ransomware that had Starbucks manually scheduling people and writing them checks for their paychecks. It hit them, it hit Walgreens. There was large grocery chains in the UK that got affected. Apparently Anheuser-Busch and Ford both use them, but there's been no report of issues from there, which doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. It just hasn't been reported. But I guess the big story for me about this is who's responsible? And what I mean by that is, I'll pick on Starbucks for a minute. Starbucks used Blue Yonder. Does Starbucks own any responsibility in this? I think they do. I think that if you bring on a vendor, part of your vendor onboarding needs to be risk assessment and cyber readiness of that vendor. And you also need to incorporate these vendors in your incident response plans or your own cyber readiness. It's one thing to say, okay, if something happens to us, if we get hacked, here's what we're going to do. But as soon as you start having a reliance on third-party vendors to run your business, they need to come under the umbrella of your corporate cyber readiness. When I was going through reading this, one of the things that came back to mind was the CrowdStrike incident. There was a lot of companies that were affected by that. There was a lot of airlines that were affected by that. But the one airline that seemed to be struggling and falling way behind was Delta. And so was that because Delta got hit worse than anyone else? Or was it because Delta wasn't prepared the same way that others were? And so that's I guess my message behind this story is that you can offload the work to somebody else, but you can't offload the responsibility and the ownership.
There's another similar story that came up, and this is going to be just run rampant in companies right now. Somebody got a chatbot, 600,000 records from a chatbot, an AI chatbot, happened to have a whole pile of information in it. A SaaS program somebody put in there did not check this to see that this vendor did the basics and the basics. And I will tell you, just for anybody, and Terry or somebody more technical can drop onto me from great heights, as we would say, but I've been through the AWS backend, and I absolutely amazed that anybody gets the security set up right. So you've got all these guys who've set up, they get an AWS account, they've got a chatbot, they're selling this service or this AI service, and you don't even know if it's protected.
So that's a great point. So we do a lot of audits, right? So Office 365 is another example. Another gate is not 100% secure. There could be vulnerable plugins, 2FAs missing on certain accounts, whatever it is. And we'll sometimes get pushback. Why do I want to audit somebody else's system? I want to see what my system looks like. I don't care about anything else. But they don't realize that everything's all tied in together.
Yep.
So you need to get that assessment done.
Over the past year, I've had a chance to meet with our senior law enforcement and intelligence officials, and we've talked a lot of things. But the thing that really is catching a lot of attention right now is structural risk in the economy. And it was interesting to see a presentation where they were highlighting, we don't know who the key players are that can have such a massive impact if you take them out. And for those listening, if you've seen that hilarious Lego block meme of everything depending on open source software, it's this one little tiny pillar. If you kick it over, the entire thing falls over. When attackers have realized it doesn't just apply to code, it applies to vendors. John, I was looking at Blue Yonder, 3,000 customers, huge names here. We're talking grocery stores had their actual supply of food disrupted. And the days are over where IT is a cute little thing that is on the side of the organization. I was at a global bank customer and I walked by and it said in 1984, 83, we had 25 personal computers. And that kind of scale, not paying attention to these supply chain vulnerabilities, is not material. Today, it's very material. But I would argue that we need to take the same approach to structural systemic risk in technology that we do in the global financial system. And I sure hope it doesn't take a 2008 style event in the tech ecosystem, but I feel like we're cruising for one of those. because you've got Blue Yonder, you've got CrowdStrike, you've got other things that have happened. Microsoft's attacks by the nation states in Russia and China. We actually do need to regulate tech. And the other part is that this also gets into complexities around market share. Is it really good idea that one company holds 3,000 enterprises worth of risk? Is that too much risk concentration from a societal perspective?
Yeah.
Having those conversations, because we still treat computers like they're the cute couple dozen microcomputers in the bank in 1984. And it's meant, no, this is the bank. In fact, tech arguably is more important to the global economy than the financial system in and of itself. When you think about the potential for instability to cause chaos, because the financial sector is now well regulated.
And you make a great point, David, that you talked about Blue Yonder hitting over like 3,000 customers. There's no regulation. It doesn't say that you have to do this. And I don't know whether it's once you get beyond, if you have more than 100 customers, then you have to step up your game from an audit perspective or whatever. But yeah, it gets to where CrowdStrike was a faux pas internally, but look at the impact it had on companies globally. I can go back and look at Rogers a couple of years ago when somebody made a mistake there and it brought everything down, and companies like Interact didn't have a backup. They only used Rogers. Interact transactions were not being processed.
And Interact is one of the best run organizations. Their technology in terms of preventing errors, they've been very good. They get caught, anybody can get caught. And look at Veeam last week. Veeam, another, I don't think there's 3 or 4, 9 out of 10 CVE vulnerabilities get reported, and Veeam has 80% of the market. So the SaaS piece is something that people need to pay attention to, for sure. I want to run to your next story on, John, and that's the city of Hamilton.
Yes.
The hits just keep on coming, as they say in FM radio for those guys.
For sure. I mean, this was back in February, so it's not a recent story, but they're still suffering from it. I have an acquaintance who has a family member that works for the city of Hamilton, and they are still doing a lot of their processing manually. They've lost a lot of employee records and things like that they have to recreate all of this. And so it's now 10 months later, and they are $9.6 million into the battle. They are a long way from being finished. And to add insult to injury, in trying to bring their systems back up, they've been hit by over $800,000 worth of imposter vendors stealing money from them. And they don't know, because if somebody sends in an invoice saying you're past due with this invoice, they have no systems to go back to look to see whether that's right or not.
This is an interesting point. I did a couple of keynote talks at a couple of municipality conferences, and the mayor for the city of Hamilton came out saying, okay, we're going to emphasize our commitment to a full review once these systems are fully restored, understand the breaches or origins, and implement a stronger system and protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. They don't realize that most companies or businesses don't have the proper detection technology in place to know there's a hacker in there. And they don't have the proper response plan to get them out. But the challenge here is that the average time that a hacker is in a network undetected is 286 days. And when they finally did the IR on the city, they found out that the hackers have been in the system since April 2019. Most likely, a lot of companies use technology that relies on logs. And logs get delayed, logs get modified, logs lie. When an attack occurs, a lot of times these SIMs and whatever don't see this stuff. They need to rely on full packet capture technology to know there's a hacker in there. He's going to see these reconnaissance tools that are scanning the network. That's not normal. Why are these brute forces happening? Why are these privilege escalations happening? These logs aren't picking this up. So they really need to have better technology in place to know there's a hacker in there, and they better have a good response plan to get them out.
Terry, I need to know, do you have a tattoo that says 286 days? You should get one, man. You can, when you turn up on somebody's doorstep.
It's been 286 days.
Carry 286 Cutler.
There you go.
So one of the things I think a lot about this is, if we picture the city ransomware attack in physical world as an arson attack, and the building gets burned down. And all of a sudden you've got to rebuild the building, but you discover that the ground is also contaminated from 100 years of history. And so you now have to do environmental reclamation while rebuilding your building, while still running your organization. That's a lot. That's a lot to expect in organization. Now, what terrifies me is, John, the very valid point that you made, that the business email compromise activity happening within this. And if criminals realize that this is a great diversionary attack, burn the system down. Okay, now maybe they won't pay the ransom, but we destroy the systems of record because, as Terry notes, we've been dwelling for 286 times. We know who their suppliers are. We now know the right asks. We know the people to target. So as they're in bunker recovery mode, the actual money play here, this feels like Ocean's 15 cyber, is to actually go after the invoicing. And it's terrifyingly frigging brilliant. But I will also say, as the official, semi-official, self-appointed, probably is the most accurate, self-appointed maintainer of Canadian cyber Guinness World Records, that's now 9.6 million is the most has ever been publicly revealed by a Canadian municipality for an attack. Previously, St. John, New Brunswick at 3 million was the holder of this. And what's going to be really interesting is, to what extent did they have cyber insurance? To what extent is cyber insurance going to cover that 9.6 million? And what we just saw, Terry and Jim, you'll love this, and John, is TELUS just released their cyber insurance study. And shockingly, people are not getting the payouts they expected from cyber insurance.
So I get this thing all the time. We get brought in to assess people's cyber insurance, the questionnaire. And a lot of times they say, yeah, we have this, we have all this stuff, no problem. They submit it and they get accepted. I'm like, yes, of course you're going to get accepted. But when something happens and you check yes, and you don't have it, like log monitoring, are you doing a penetration test once a year, but they've never had one done in their whole life? And that's exactly why they're not getting their payouts.
I refer to it back as with automotive insurance and snow tires. Everybody says, oh yeah, I've got snow tires because I want to get that discount. But the first time you go out and have an accident or something happens between that November 15th and April 15th, and you don't have snow tires on, they won't cover you.
Yeah, it's like what I used to say, I was a non-smoker for my life insurance. You always forget when you fall off the wagon. I haven't smoked in 20 years, though, son. Terry, what would you bring us?
One of them is the story about Andrew Tate. You may have heard of this name before online. Long story short, who Andrew Tate is, a former athlete turned internet personality. And he's got a lot of controversial views about how men should act, how women should act. And it draws up a lot of both positive and negative attention. So what happened was, his platform, which is called The Real World, suffered a hack this past month, and it affected almost 800,000 users. So they got access to the platform and obtained all the usernames and passwords. And not only that, it accessed public chat rooms, private chat servers, and extracted all this stuff. And the hackers were at a point where, dude, this is like hilariously insecure. There's nothing here. You made my job so easy, kind of thing. And they started going after all the users. So when you get affected by such a size of a data breach like this, and this is also a comment I get all the time from solopreneurs. I don't need cybersecurity. Who's going to want to hack me? I'm solo. I don't have a system. But when something like this happens, all of a sudden now you wish you would have had it. So my gut is that because all these usernames and passwords have been extracted, they're going to go after the user accounts that have registered with the platform. They're going to try and phish them, cause financial harm to them, scams, frauds, whatever it is. Change your password, make sure you got two-step verification turned on, and monitor your credit scores, of course.
This was not a financially motivated attack. This was folks who are allegedly, or at least on the surface, saying that they're pro-LGBTQ issues. And Andrew Tate is seen from that perspective as the king of quote unquote toxic masculinity. And it's been a while since we've seen a really good hacktivist, everyone saddle up and take on a bad guy from their hacktivist perspective. And interesting to see that. And one of the things, if I had to lay a prediction for 2025, hacktivism's back, baby. It's going to be back in a big way. for the next couple of years. And it's going to be hilariously awful for a lot of people.
That's like having a disgruntled employee in one way, right? You say something that no one agrees with, and all of a sudden you get hacked because no one likes what you said. So you really got to get protected all around.
Yeah, you got Kash Patel, the nominee for the FBI, and allegedly the Iranians were right on old Kash's accounts. It's going to be fun times for non-crime related cybercrime, non-financially motivated cybercrime.
It is. I feel like the American Civil Liberties Union, who always gets, because they'll take on some loser that you just wish just would disappear from the planet. You go, why are they doing this? And my first instinct for these guys is, oh, who cares? But the fact is that even cyber activism it hurts us all. And you can't take any joy in watching these guys come down. But it's like when the Chinese are hacking Donald Trump's phone and tell me they're not.
Yeah.
We look at it and say, oh God, I hope he's not telling people his friends what the nuclear codes are. We'll find out.
I on that point, it's just a note. We had all the stories earlier this fall about the Chinese sophisticated campaigns in the U.S. telephone networks. And we all assumed that all this idiocy on my part. Oh, so they caught them and they kicked them out. And then this week, they're like, we still haven't successfully kicked the Chinese out of the U.S. telecommunications service. So what we've known and has been publicly disclosed is numerous major big name U.S. telecommunications operators were compromised by a Chinese state-sponsored group, allegedly leveraging the very inherent tools built into them for lawful intercepts for things like wiretaps, etc. Originally, when the story first broke in the fall, we thought that this was an opportunity for the Chinese to understand the American intelligence apparatus and whose they were looking at on their side. Since then, we learned that the targeting was highly intentional, targeting the political campaigns of the U.S. presidential candidates at the time. And this was as bad as it gets in terms of really trying to understand that. And you could understand why the Chinese state was so very invested in understanding what was being discussed amongst those campaigns, considering they're now facing 60 to 100% tariffs and their economy is going to be even more battered than the 25% tariff threat against Canada. Now, what we learned this week was a lot of us had assumed that this has ended, that stage one incident response contained. And then, of course, you got to kick these kids out. And what we're hearing is we have not been able to fully kick them out of the networks. That is a stunning admission of failure. That is unprecedented as far as I can tell in terms of these big hacks. Like if you go back to big national security hacks before, the Microsoft ones, notably SolarWinds, you didn't have people come out and say, and the Russians are still in SolarWinds. It's bad. And it's particularly bad given the instability that we're experiencing geopolitically. We just saw South Korea almost have a military coup no one saw coming and martial law declared. Things are not well in that part of the world right now or terribly stable. And if you're China going, it's a month before he becomes president, maybe now's the time, the American political system at its most paralyzed, we just grab that Taiwan and wrap that in a bow and get that done. Oh, and we can just shut down the phones and the power and everything else on the West Coast. The FBI is recommending that people perhaps use their own secure end-to-end encryption communications. That about face. I might need a new award category, Jim, next year for that. The 180, it's not a 286 from a Terry perspective, but it's the cyber 180 when you want someone spin.
But the whole network is flawed, right? There's a vulnerability that goes right across the nation, which allows you to have SS7 attacks, which allows you to intercept phone calls. You could be on the other side of the planet and you'll still intercept it. But in order for that to be fixed, you need to change the entire infrastructure, like in North America.
You say vulnerability and I say feature.
Undocumented.
Well,
feature.
no, but the American government that has like somewhere, Snowden is sitting there in Russia going, I had to live in Russia for the rest of my life because I told people they were hacking the US phone system. But yes, I think it's preposterously insecure. But David, you're right. The 180 of now, the FBI is saying maybe encryption is a good thing.
Yeah.
And also, guys, you can't be trusted with the keys to that encryption for exactly the reason that Terry just said. So, yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine though, if the government had insisted that they encrypt the phone system and they put in a back door and somebody got access to the back door?
I encourage your readers to go back to the ancient history of the first crypto war and crypto not being cryptocurrency encryption and learn about the Clipper chip.
The intelligence agents have to have a backdoor to the encryption system, because how are they going to monitor for terrorist threats? Like, how are they going to be able to do their job more efficiently if they can't see what's happening?
So I'll counterpoint on that. They cannot be trusted with the keys to the back door because they have butterfingers and they lose the keys. Let's not forget that the NSA lost Eternal Blue and all the fun that came from WannaCry. So no, they cannot have the keys. They can never have the keys. What they can do is good old fashioned police intelligence work. All of these great encrypted phone busts that they've been having, where they actually seeded the technology, they created the startup company, they gave the phones to the criminals. Do that. Do exactly that. Create malware that can intercept the actual device. And if you own one end of the telephone string end-to-end encryption, you don't need the damn crypto keys. You could listen live. Amazing.
Or do the Europeans did, bust somebody, take their phone and pretend you're them. They brought down the Europeans have just been going this month. Europe has had 3 or 4 big busts this year where they've broken up networks. Why do we never hear about a Canadian bust breaking up a network or a US one?
So I will tell you, in the things that I've learned in the last 2 weeks that made my hair go grayer or balder or made me even angrier. Let's start with our embattled RCMP, who are now being asked to magically protect the world's largest undefended border because shenanigans. The RCMP's National Cybercrime Unit and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, they're the point agency for all cyber-related fraud calls. They got 400,000 calls in 2023. They answered 30,000 of them because that's all their staff to do. So they have 7.5% answer rate. So I've always been wondering why they kept saying that reported fraud was 570 million, but we suspect it could be 10 times higher. It's because the 570 million comes from the phone calls they were able to answer. And that was only 7.5% of the total number of calls. And so we're not resourcing it. And one of the other things, I found this line in the RCMP's 24 budget, and it was interesting. It was like, we're not cutting frontline policing, but we're going to cut policing administrative services. Dear friends, that's when they say, we're cutting down on the nerds. And so that's why you're not seeing it, because we're not resourcing it. And I have screamed from the hills, literally in Parliament Hill, about this. But I'm also tired, so I'm stopped showing up for these things because
it's absolutely frightening.
Yeah.
Because people aren't, other than the 5 individuals that went into Hillcrest Mall yesterday and robbed people's jewelry store, other than that, they're not doing the face-to-face things anymore. It's all of the online backdoor hidden ways into systems. And when you've got an agency that you're being told that if you have an issue, you need to report it to them, and they're only reviewing or getting through 30,000 of 400 and some odd thousand reports, that's frightening. And all that's doing is telling these cyber criminals, hey, we got free reign.
Never. No, but if you read a lot of mysteries like I do, there's always these cyber cops, or there's always these people who report to, they'll be called as witnesses, and they do all these incredible things to find this person, do all of these great technical things. And the fact is that your average police force, even in the city of Toronto, may have a handful of these people if you're lucky.
If that.
And on the city of Toronto, so 2 weeks ago, we found out from the Globe and Mail that one of the most innocuous music nonprofits in the country, called Factor, they get something like 15 million a year from the federal government, had 9.5 million taken from a Scotiabank bank account. They're now suing Scotiabank. They're suing a crypto mining company that the equipment was used to make this, this money was used to buy this cryptocurrency called Money Laundering Kids 101. And according to the Globe and Mail article, there wasn't even an investigator yet officially assigned to this $9.5 million threat. It used to joke with you, Jim, that it took $50,000 or more to get police out of bed. Apparently now the threshold is getting close to 10 million to get them excited. And when I was in one of those very uncomfortable meetings where I said, anyone know if North Korea got that money for their weapons program or to send troops to Russia? Because we don't track the money at a macro level in this country. And if you don't track the money, politicians don't care. If politicians don't care, you don't get money for cops.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Terry, before you get away, I want to go back to one, because you brought up another story that I think is really important, and that is the ability of companies to get past two-factor authentication by stealing session cookies was one of the stories you came up with. And I think this is a big one.
In fact, it
you want
actually
to just run by that?
Yeah, in fact, it actually segues to the Andrew Tate story, because now everybody's accounts, used as passwords have now been taken. And a lot of people say, I got two-step verification, I don't care about this stuff. But they don't realize that if they get a phishing email or they get a message on Facebook and they click on a link and it asks them to log into a service like Facebook. So I'm already logged with Facebook. Why is it asking me to log back in again? Okay, I logged back in. Next, his username and password and the session token have now been stolen. The hackers have now become what's called a man in the middle. They've taken the session and now they can log in as you without ever knowing what that password was and you get right in. And now they've taken over your account. They'll change your phone number. They'll change the password. You get kicked out. Why do I care? It's only my Facebook account. But if you're a business owner and you're running Facebook campaigns, if you're running the marketing stuff, all that gets taken away from you now. And now all of a sudden, now the content on your website becomes Arab. We've seen that. Or there's fake ads going out and you're paying for all this because you can't access the account to change your credit card. So it's a trickle down the mess.
One of the things that I got from reading this story and just reading your notes on it was, I may never click that checkbox again that says, keep me logged in. That just keeps your session cookies alive for longer.
Yep. There are two things that frighten me about anything browser-based. The keep me logged in is one. And the other one that makes my blood boil is people that say, save my password. My wife's not here, so I can say it. She does it all the time. And I keep telling her that it's less critical for her, but you get into a corporation where you've got people that are doing this and they travel and somebody steals their computer. Now they've got all your login capabilities. Yep. All they need to do is hack into your computer and they've got it all.
And the one thing I'll say is this ties back into how we sold multi-factor authentication to get corporations to deploy it and the compromises that we made, how they can do things and save session cookies, or if they're on premise, they're not MFA'd in, because these were just different compromises made on the path to getting social acceptance within an organization of these security tools. And gang, it's going to be really hard to do the easy technology thing of saying we need to do more MFA challenges. You're going to get the greatest resistance in IT is change management. And so what I would say is from this, use your phishing simulation tests to start targeting your groups where you say, hey, you consistently fall victim to phishing. You're now going to have to do daily MFA challenges. Target your inconvenience to the areas of greatest risk because you are not going to get carte blanche to roll this back.
Yeah.
What we did, David, when we deployed MFA a year and a half ago, is we went what I would consider one step further. We went Windows Hello for Business, and we're not passwordless yet, but we're going that way. But in order for people to log into their computer, they either have to use facial rec or fingerprint. And so to me, that's the best means of MFA, because otherwise, if you've got a code or a PIN, it's just another password. So it's better than not having it. But to me, the best way to do it is biometrics.
Yeah, I think the challenge is going to be the cat and mouse part of it. But most organizations, particularly those who are doing remote, if the laptop gets borked and the productivity impacts are down, making sure you got good processes to support exactly what you just said. Can we get equipment out the next day or within what the timelines are? But this is, Terry, like the exact same thing we saw with Genesis Marketplace. I think your points are valid that it's going to be an interesting year ahead of us.
And one of the things that grabbed me about this was, even if you've got passwordless access, you've got tokens, you've got some sort of other, if you've got passkey, you can still get beat if somebody get a hold of your session cookies. And this is something I think people have to step up and say, this is a real risk.
And this goes back to your point. There's no silver bullet to stop a hacker, right? You can only make it as hard as possible for them to get in. So they move on to someone else.
The guys with the 286 tattoos, clever
They're
thinkers.
coming at you. Yeah, they're coming at you. Okay, Shipley, you've got John and Terry brought up their stories. The pressure's on you now to up the game. What do you got for us?
conscious of the time, but I would just raise the stinky being our award for when vendors overly brag, etc. This one goes to GitLab, perhaps overly promoting the AI advantages of Copilot lies, damn lies, and statistics. Dan Campano, the registers covered it really well, where there were some bold claims about how great Copilot was at improving developer accuracy, efficiency. Campano points out, you're talking about one of the simplest, most routine, non-creative tasks known to man, which is writing API endpoints with CRUDs. Their sample sizes were not, what we say, massively large. Their methodology was somewhat questioned. Dan eviscerates various points made by this. And I think there's some really good points. This isn't to say that AI tools helping developers can't be useful. There's a reason that Stack Overflow's traffic is nosediving and people are using these tools. However, they aren't better than people, particularly at the really tough creative coding tasks. And what I'll say is this. In my time in technology and in the team that I have, the developers we have are not code translators from business analysts with requirements. They are creative problem solvers crafting well done solutions thoughtfully and carefully. And that requires a level of reasoning still not present in these auto magic, statistically driven generative AI solutions. So helpful tools, but they are like the driver aids, the blindside assist, the forward collision, all of those things with a good driver. They are not. They are pretending that they're full self-driving cars like Teslas do. And I guarantee you that will have the same result on the cyber highway as it does for many people on American highways today.
As a person who thought that programming was the introduction of errors to perfectly good code, I'm pleased to see that there's still hope. Yeah. So David, did you have another story?
I think we actually covered the major stuff that I was looking for, which was the telephone hack, the fact that they're still not kicked out of the system. It's extraordinarily disquieting on that front. And I think you raised some good questions. What about Canada? I think currently the best case scenario for us is we're not the interesting place to be spying on right now. And currently we are simply the butt of jokes about being the 51st state. The best security for Canada being ignored right now because we are not prepared. So I will take this slight, we're not cared about, and I'm going to pray that's the case.
I'm not sure. I thought about that and I was going to make the Canadian joke that nobody cares about us. I think they're in our networks as deeply as they are in the US. And because of the fact we at least have some interesting stuff happening in government, I really think people should be standing up and demanding that we get more action from our government, because I honestly believe that we're probably as infiltrated as anywhere. I'm going to actually send out a note to Rogers and Bell to see if anybody will give me any information on that. I'm not expecting that they're going to tell me.
Two things give me comfort that are different. I have the privilege of working with all these companies. So full disclosure on that side, they collaborate and talk and share because there's so few of them, right? That's the difference between they have this positive history of collaboration with the federal government through things called CST. So I'm placing my hope and my faith in the people that I know on those side and the high level of collaboration. But in terms of the federal government, I will add this, Jim. So I found out last night that C-26, our critical cyber infrastructure bill, which I went in front of the Senate 2 weeks ago and testified and said, hey, it still has these flaws, but if you amend this bill to better deal with the CISO personal liability, which I think is still ridiculous, you're going to kick this back to the House of Commons. It's probably not going to make it through, and we're in the whole going to be worse off for it. So I went there, I pointed out there were still flaws, said, get it done, but come back and fix it. And then I found out a typographic error in the actual wording of the bill as it was passed on from the House of Commons to the Senate has forced the Senate to send the bill back to the House of Commons through all three stages with the corrected ordering number, which has jeopardized the entire bill. And that is, to me, the most damning thing about Canadian cybersecurity they could possibly say, is that when it comes to even the laws to protect critical infrastructure, we can't even get the wording right.
And it's frightening because you hear all these stories about them getting new warships and subs and helicopters and this and that and the other thing. But this is probably as critical, if not more critical, than any of that.
Yeah, John, if you think it's a dumpster fire in the critical infrastructure law, I take a look at our C-27 and the absolute trash incinerator that is the current state of legislation.
But I'm going to leave a warning on this piece because it comes up. And as much as I don't want to be political with the show, but I got to say, I don't want some idiot running my government who comes in and says, I'm from private industry, / get rid of all that bureaucracy. But we have to acknowledge, and if we don't get it soon, especially in Canada, we have become you remember when people would say that that IT was Dr. No? Our government has become Dr. No. And that is, if we do nothing, then we will never be faulted. The fact that you can have a rule that forces you to take an important piece of legislation back to the ground and somebody doesn't stand up, all parties stand up, which they can do any time unanimously, and say, this is wrong, fix it now, because they have no sense of urgency. They want to play those games. They want to do all of these things. They want to do, and they seem harmless. They are not.
When political survival is at stake and we decide we're going to do a half-baked vote-buying GST, HST rebate program, holy crap, you can get legislation written up and passed in the House and Commons in, 6 years, critical infrastructure. And when people in the Senate were challenging me with my rhetoric, my hyperbole, saying that the government does not care about cybersecurity, and I point out 6 years it takes to get this done, and 1 week when their necks are on the line, even when it's a really bad idea.
Yep. So to all of our American listeners who are looking at the insanity of their government, Canada joins you, but we're going to build a wall and the U.S. is going to pay for it. We have to wrap it up there. And I hope this was good for our listeners as well. We had a great conversation. If there are topics you want us to do a deeper dive into, let me know, as well as any comments about the show. You can send those to editorial@technewsday.ca. We are going to have an end of the year show, and I want to thank our panel. Thanks to our guest, Terry Cutler.
Thanks for having me.
John Pinard, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was nice chatting with you and David and Terry.
And David Shipley, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you and great to have you on the show. It's always great to hear from folks still in the field with really good experience. So yeah, This was fun.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for spending part of your weekend with us. I'll be back in the cybersecurity news story desk on Monday morning. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend.